Good morning. Welcome to Ashley Ridge Church. We are so glad you are here. If you guys want to stand, we are going to sing. And heaven thundered, and the world was born. Life begins and ends in the dust you form. Your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Nothing shall be impossible. Your kingdom reigns unstoppable. We'll shout your praise forevermore. Jesus, our God, unstoppable. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done. Unstoppable God, let your glory go on and on. Impossible things in your name, they shall be done.
Well, good morning, everyone. Quick question. Today is November 21st. Who has all their Christmas decorations up? Why? Here's the thing. Ours are up too. The reason I ask you that, or really to start that, is I have a very special announcement to make this morning. The Ashley Ridge Worship Christmas album is now live on iTunes and on Spotify. Y'all make sure you go listen to it. Taylor's on it. Nate's on it. All these people are on it. It's fantastic. It's really great music. We recorded it last year for our online Christmas services, and man, I'm super excited that we finally got those out to all of you. I've got a couple more things I want to cover. If you have any questions, any concerns, any remote thoughts of Christmas and Ashley Ridge Church, you can head to www.christmasforsomerville.com, and everything is there. You can get to it straight from the app, and We've got all kinds of details, all kinds of free stuff, like free recipes, free cookie recipes. We have details about the tree lighting, which is not this upcoming Tuesday, but the next Tuesday. Like, we got all kinds of stuff. So make sure you head to christmasforsomerville.com where you can get all those details. You can get to the iTunes or the Spotify link for that Christmas record straight from there as well. Y'all, Christmas is coming. It's here. I'm excited. Christmas time at Ashridge Church is an absolute ball. And one more thing about Christmas. If you walked in the front doors this morning, you saw the food truck out there. We are collecting food in these fun little boxes for Hearts for Somerville to give to kids in need over the course of their Christmas break, okay? We did some Thanksgiving food. Now we're doing stuff specifically for Christmas break. A lot of the kids that Hearts for Somerville serve, they have trouble making things happen when they're not in school. So that's specifically what that is for. There's a list of exactly what to buy, the amounts to buy them in. You put them in the box, and then you bring the box back on November or December 5th or 12th. It's super easy. We've got 200 boxes, y'all. 200 boxes. Our goal is to give every single one of those out this morning. You can get them right after church. Last thing, this upcoming Sunday, 1 week from today, 7 days, we are online only. We think it's really important at Ashridge Church that you have time and space to do the family things that you really enjoy doing. And part of that is traveling for Thanksgiving. Part of that is giving some of the people up here, some of our volunteers, a break in order to do those things. And we believe it's really important that you feast. And Jen's going to preach about that coming up. And I really think it's important that we do those things and do them well, intentionally, on purpose. So next Sunday, we are online only. Y'all don't want to miss it. It's the beginning of Advent. It's the beginning of our Christmas message series called The Last King. You don't want to miss it. That's going to be 10 a.m. online only this upcoming Sunday. Cool. I covered a lot of ground. I'm out of breath. I'm going to hand it back to these guys and continue on with their service. Thanks.
All right, we're going to keep singing, guys. You have brought me to the water where my past can be swept away in the current of your mercy, and I know I'll never be the same. There's no limit to your crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. So I yield to you, to your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. So make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. In the crushing, in the pressing, you are making new wine. In the soil I now surrender, you are breaking new ground. You are breaking new ground. So make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. 'Cause where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. 'Cause where there is new wine, there is new power, there is new freedom, and the kingdom is here. I lay down my old flames to carry your new fire today. Make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me.
God, I thank you so much for who you are, that we can sing these songs. And I pray that we would know deep in our heart of who you truly are. God, that you are unstoppable, that you do miracles. God, that you can come, and when we feel like we are nothing, that you take that and you make something beautiful, because that's the God you are. You are loving, you are strong, you are kind. You never leave us or forsake us. God, and I thank you for being that. And I pray that if when we forget that, because I know I do, that you would remind us that that's who you are. That where we end, you're still going. You're still there. So God, I pray that you would just stamp that into our hearts and remind us that when we need it. In your name, amen. Well, guys, thanks again for being here today. Students, if you are in the room, you are dismissed to go be in your small groups, and we have a fun video for you guys.
Well, hey, everybody. So glad that you're here today. It's James and band. By the way, you guys did a fantastic job. You sound great from up here. So good to be with you this way today as we're walking into Thanksgiving. Couple quick things before Pastor Jen comes that I want to let you know about. Number one is our Christmas website is live. You can go to christmasforsomerville.com. Everything Christmas related, from the tree lighting that's coming up on Tuesday the 28th to the AR Kids and Students parties to our Christmas Eve service, all of that information can be found there. In fact, there are some invite cards that we want you to pick up on your way out of the door today so that you can share them with a friend, mail them to a neighbor, stick one on your fridge, take a couple and pass them out to people. But all of the information is in that one place. And the best news is, if you have the Ashley Ridge app, it's right there on the homepage. Just click Christmas for Somerville. The second Christmas-related thing that I want to tell you about is the Ashley Ridge Christmas album is coming. I'm so excited. Lee, in just a little bit, is going to tell you the exact release date where you can go find that on where you get music. So maybe you're on Spotify. We'd love for you to download and purchase it on iTunes. Wherever you get your digital music from, it's Echoes, the Christmas album. Can't wait for you guys to hear it and celebrate the season. That link is going to be on the Christmas for Somerville website as well. Lots of good stuff, but if you need to know anything Christmas, that's where you go. christmasforsomerville.com or the Ashley Ridge app. Here we go. It's Pastor Jen.
Hey, Ashley Ridge, it's so good to be with you today, even though I'm not actually with you. What a crazy world we're living in that things like this are possible. I'm so grateful for all of the volunteers and the teams at Ashley Ridge that are able week after week to set up these environments. And so even on a Sunday where I'm not with you in person, we can still worship together. It's the week of Thanksgiving. I'm actually on a much anticipated and set back trip with my family, but good to be here with you today and excited about everything coming in the next few weeks, which James just talked about. But today, I do want to sit and focus right on where we are, which is the week of Thanksgiving. I know everybody out there has plans of some variety of some sort, whether you're going over the river to grandmother's house or into your own house, whether you like ham or turkey. It is a week of thanks. It is a week of feasting. And now y'all know that I love some history, and I want to spend a couple minutes here talking about some history around Thanksgiving and how we got here. Because for most of us, when we think about the history of Thanksgiving and where it came from, we do think about the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag. That's who you think about, right? The specific tribe that had that first Thanksgiving feast with those new arrivals to Plymouth in 1621. But the reality is, long before 1621 and long since 1621, setting aside time for feasting after harvest has happened in a lot of ways, in a lot of circumstances. But more specifically, the idea of having a day of Thanksgiving in our country came about by means of presidential proclamation. We go all the way back to the first one, George Washington himself, In the years following the Revolutionary War, having experienced some extreme moments of fast, for lack of a better way to describe that, the moments when they were at Valley Forge outside of Philadelphia, starving and freezing through the winter, and everything that those years of war had brought, they then found themselves at the beginning of this new nation and recovering from that experience. And so on September 28, 1789, the first federal Congress was getting ready to leave for recess. They've been doing this always, y'all. Congressional recess has been a thing since the beginning. The first federal Congress is getting ready to leave for recess, and they asked the president to recommend a national day of Thanksgiving, a public day of shared focus where everybody was going to be asked to give thanks for the abundance of what this nation promised and the surroundings that we had, and specifically to give thanks to our Creator, that we're here, that we exist. And so George Washington issued that proclamation, and it was the first time Thanksgiving was officially celebrated under the new Constitution. In the years that followed, different presidents would declare a day of Thanksgiving. Sometimes it wasn't even in November. They would pick different days and different times, but moments when they would call everybody to this specific time of celebration. But over the years, it started to settle in the months following summer and the greatest times of harvest, giving the climate of our nation. And on the other side of that, when there would be those celebratory feasts. And so it was in 1863 when President Abraham Lincoln issued his proclamation of Thanksgiving that it was set for the last Thursday of November. Now that seemed simple enough, but y'all also know that we like to argue about things in our country. And sometimes things that don't even feel all that significant that somehow become deeply significant. So in 1863, Thanksgiving becomes the last Thursday in November, and that stands all the way until 1939. All right, are y'all ready for this? Do y'all know your FDR Thanksgiving fun facts? Here we go. In 1939, our country was still in the midst of the Great Depression and very much concerned with economic recovery. And in that year, Thanksgiving was going to fall not only the last Thursday of the month, but that last Thursday of the month was actually the last day of November. And the concern was that if we waited that long to have Thanksgiving, then people would wait that much longer to start shopping for Christmas. And in a time when economic recovery was so top on everybody's mind, all of FDR's advisors came to him and said, we really think you need to change the date of Thanksgiving. And he took that advice and thought, surely this won't be that big of a deal and everybody understands what we're trying to do. And so FDR issued a presidential proclamation moving Thanksgiving to the second to last Thursday of November. And now you might think, okay, no big deal, everybody make your pumpkin pie a little bit earlier. Only it was a huge deal, because it turns out people are planners around very specific things. And by specific things, I mean vacations, football calendars, and eating. People went crazy in 1939 over the fact that this was going to disrupt football schedules, and this was going to mess up the plans they had and when they intended to start shopping. In fact, one of the interesting things is it was actually the small shop owners, the small business owners, that really didn't like the change. And there were letters and campaigns written to FDR to explain to him that if the shopping season got condensed, then the crowds would get so large in these major retailers that people are forced to then go shop locally. And so they didn't want a longer shopping season. They wanted a shorter shopping season, which they believed would benefit them. And so you had these small shop owners who were upset. You had all the football fans who were upset. This is 1939, by the way, not 2021. 1939. And everybody's going, we already had vacations planned. We had the days marked out. And now it's amazing the things we still worry about in the midst of a Great Depression, right? This is the Great Depression. These were still, you can see all these newspaper articles where people were worried. In fact, it got to the point that some states refused to change because the president would set this proclamation of Thanksgiving, but then individual state governors had to set it. And so in 1939, when FDR makes this move, half of the states went with him and celebrated, and the others stayed on the last Thursday. So half the country was on leftovers when the rest of the country was still preparing their turkey. They had what they called Thanksgiving and Franksgiving, playing off of FDR's first name. Well, the following year, it wasn't much better. 32 states issued a proclamation that went with FDR and where he had gone with it, and the other 16 states refused. Now, because we are here in South Carolina, this is your fun fact to bring to your Thanksgiving table this week. Where do you think South Carolina landed in that mix? I'm not even going to tell you. Y'all look it up. All right. So 32 states went with FDR. 16 stayed on the same way. And so for 2 years, the country celebrated Thanksgiving on different days. But then to end the confusion, Congress decided to set a fixed date for the holiday. And so on October 6th, 1941, the House passed a joint resolution declaring the last Thursday in November to be the legal Thanksgiving Day. The Senate, however, not to be outdone, offered an amendment and said that it needed to be the fourth Thursday to account for the years when there was a fifth Thursday that would shorten the shopping season by too much. And so it became the fourth Thursday. No, not the fourth Thursday. See, here I am messing it up again. It became see, I'm all over the place. The fourth Thursday in November is the federal Thanksgiving Day holiday. Did y'all know that? Do you feel better because of that? This is all sorts of interesting information you can take to your gatherings this week. The reason I went to such lengths to share that with you is because I think it's not to be missed that having a time set apart for Thanksgiving isn't obvious. It is not obvious when and how and if and even that we should stop everything and give thanks. And yet for so long, and now I'm talking centuries and millennia old, we have accounts of every community and people group throughout time that has noted it to be an important thing to stop collectively and give thanks. And the reason is quite simply that if you don't do it on purpose, you never will. If you don't set a time aside to give thanks, then you end up in a place where Thanksgiving doesn't feel productive. Think about it. Think about what I just described. Even in the midst of the Great Depression, people were struggling. I mean, I'm not joking that they were arguing about football and vacations, but the struggle was also very much in front of them. People were out of work. People didn't have money. They didn't have savings. They were concerned with real concerns. To stop and give thanks in that moment, go back to Washington. They were out of the Revolutionary War, but they had no sense of security as a nation. There was so much unknown in front of them. And so there had to be a proclamation to say, let's stop and make time to give thanks. Thanksgiving doesn't feel productive. It doesn't really even feel convenient. Which is why even in recent years, we've moved the shopping up to Thanksgiving Day itself. We got to make the most of every minute that we have. But underlying all of it is this idea of this week this day, this week, this season, is that we ought to stop. We ought to intentionally make the time to give thanks. So I want to take us back to another moment. Like I said, these moments have been happening for as long as there have been people groups. And there was a moment towards the end chronologically of the Old Testament. And so if you open up your Bible, if you still have one of those in paper form, when you open it up, the Old Testament ends with some of the minor prophets and other things that chronologically were not the end. But if you go back to the stories and the history that's accounted in Ezra and Nehemiah, this was actually the last part of the story we get before a long silence. And what was happening in those moments is Israel was coming out of a time of exile. The Babylonian exile had gone on, people had been disrupted, taken from homes, cities destroyed. And so just like these other moments in history that I've been describing, we were coming out of a long season of angst. And then they got to this place where Nehemiah had led a group back to Jerusalem. They'd rebuilt the gates, rebuilt the walls. They were establishing Jerusalem again as the center of their life and their faith. And there's a moment in the middle of Nehemiah. It's really important that this is in the middle because what comes after it is super important too. But there's a moment in the middle of Nehemiah after they've been building and fighting off enemies. They were literally building with one hand and holding swords with the other hand, pushing off people who didn't want to see Jerusalem rebuilt. They finally get to this place where they're at least enclosed within this wall. It took 52 days, but the wall has been built and there is some sense of we did it. We made it. We're here. And in that moment, Nehemiah and Ezra and the other leaders and teachers of the law called everyone together. And I'm in Nehemiah 8. I'm going to start reading in verse 9. It says that Nehemiah, the governor, along with Ezra, the priest and scholar, and the Levites who were teaching the people, said to all the people, "This day is holy to God, your God. Don't weep and carry on." All right, in other words, this day we're going to do something different. All these other days we're carrying on, we're weeping, we're wailing, we're working, we're trying, we're moving, we're grooving, we're doing all these things. But this day is holy. We talked a lot about holiness lately. We just came out of that series on the church. We talked so much about what it is for God to be holy, for us to be holy. And so this whole idea of being set aside, set apart, holy. We need a day that is set aside to your God. And here's what it's going to be. And they said this because all the people were weeping as they heard the words of the revelation. All right, now this is not revelation like in your Bible revelation. This was the revelation from Moses. They're going back and they're reading this account of how their life with God was supposed to go. These laws that they were following, this life together that they had gotten so far from. And as they pulled the people back together, they were trying to remind them of who they were and whose they were. And as the people read it, as they heard that reality of where they could be and where they maybe even should be versus where they were weeping. In fact, they were full out wailing. It says some people were at this point brought to their knees, faces to the ground. But then they continued and said, no, not doing this today. Instead, go home and prepare a feast, holiday food and drink. Holiday, that word, holy day. Prepare a feast for this set apart day with set apart food and drink and share it with those who don't have anything, right? We're all going to feast together. That's why we put baskets together for Thanksgiving. Hearts for Somerville has done an amazing job putting things together. There's this idea. We set aside a day for Thanksgiving. We want everyone to stop and have time to give thanks. This day is holy to God. Don't feel bad. The joy of God is your strength. It says the Levites calmed the people. quiet now. This is a holy day. Don't be upset." And so the people went off to feast, eating and drinking and including the poor in a great celebration. And now they got it. They understood the reading that had been given to them. They understood in this moment that what God had done for them wasn't dependent on them. Can I say that again? What God had done for them wasn't dependent on them. And everything God had done for them, and even the laws that had been given, were still pointing to a promise. A promise that God was going to bring his people back, that God was going to restore, that God was going to continue to be present, that when they called on the name of God, he would bring them back. He would welcome them home. And so in hearing this and remembering this, there was an invitation to make time to give thanks, to stop and take account of everything that was actually true, to remember this history they had of God being faithful to promises. Y'all, we make time for things that matter. We have to. We have to. You know this. We make time for things that matter, and it matters that we make time to be thankful. It's the very opposite of ain't nobody got time for that. It's how we live a lot of our lives. But there is a time to stop and be thankful. Let me say it to you this way. There is a time to fast, and there is also a time to feast. As we go back in Christian tradition, I know you're getting so much history today. This is everything you wanted from a Thanksgiving message. But if we go back in Christian tradition and history, Sunday became that central point of worship. And my kids asked me recently why that was, and it has a lot more to do with the Roman calendar and all these other things. But as the church and the followers of Jesus thought about it and began to interact with that calendar, it became the day every week that was set aside as a celebration, a feast day of the resurrection. Every week there was to be a reminder and a celebration that God rests and God makes things new. God rests and God makes things new. And so God makes us new. This is why every year when y'all try to give up like coffee and chocolate and all that craziness in Lent, I make it my business to remind you that you can cheat on Sundays, because Sundays never counted in Lent or the 40 days anyway, because Sunday is always a feast day. There was a mentality that said, we have to set this and decide this and make this so, or we'll consistently skip the part where we remember to be thankful, where we stop and take account of what we have, when we look to a God who is faithful to fulfill his promises. Y'all, I've said this so many times in recent months because we've been through craziness, and I'm going to keep saying it again. It's why it matters that we do this every week. It's why it matters. We can worship anywhere, anytime, and we should. But collectively, we set aside time together every week to do this, because we're making time to be thankful. We're making time for the feast. We're making time to look forward to the hope that Jesus gave us of the day that's coming when mourning will be done, tears will be wiped away, and the joy of the Lord will be our strength. So this is Thanksgiving week, and there's Thanksgiving Day. But as a people following Jesus, we set aside time every day. And we set aside together time every week. Because when we don't, we forget. When we don't do it, we simply forget. And here's what happens when we forget. We grow discontent. the kids over in AR Kids this month. A lot of you as parents, you were with your kids on Family First Sunday learning about contentment as the Life app this month. Being okay with the things you have. But when we stop taking account of the things we have, we grow more and more discontent by the moment. When we don't make time to remember, we forget and we become selfish and caught up in our own self-interest. And let me stop picking on us for a moment. And by us, I mean you and I mean me. Y'all, when I don't stop, how quickly I start to think of everything that would make my life easier. It's part of our nature. Our nature is selfish, so we have to make time. But to stop picking on us for a minute, let's go back to the Israelites in Nehemiah. So at this great moment, they've seen God be faithful, they come back, they rebuild the wall, and then everybody's, just freaking out, realizing how far they've come and how badly they've messed everything up. But then the Levites, the priests, they come in and they're comforting the people and they're calming the people, and they're being told, y'all, it's okay. We're going to stop crying now. Now is a time to celebrate and to feast. Everybody go get the good food and the good drinks and go make sure everybody has something to eat. And we're going to have this time of Thanksgiving. And so for the days that followed, they had these days of Thanksgiving. But remember how I told you it was important that this is in the middle of this story? Because we have to keep reading and telling the story. And here's what happens next. They finish the feast and they get busy. You know what their next argument was about? Taxes. And then they started arguing about land. And then they started thinking about what everyone else had. And then they started making a list of all the people they should still be afraid of, that they had been afraid of in the past. And what happens in this story is that they turn inward. It's what we do when we don't make time to do this. We turn inward, and they essentially built the wall and battened down the hatches. And this wall that was initially meant to define them and set them aside as God's people instead became this thing that kept them from going outside. And for centuries, for generation after generation, they created separation. There's so much that happens in this time period that we learn from world history, but then even by the time the gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, walk us into the period of the New Testament, we see these different fragments of the Jewish people, of the Israelite nation, and in some variation or another, they're all living this separatist mentality. Some are living in this heightened state of we've got to be so locked into how we do things so everyone else knows they're not us. And then there were others that were so worried about others invading that they separated themselves completely and they hid. And there were all these different groups, but there was this idea, this nationalism that they locked down into this place. And while they did that, they defined more and more closely the insiders and the outsiders, and they grew more and more afraid while the power of Caesar grew. This is really important. I love history, y'all. I know a lot of you are like, come on, Jen, but this is so good. This is so good. We have to remember these stories because we walk these same roads. And so this is what they did. They locked it all down. They got more afraid. They forgot to be thankful. They grew more discontent. They became so aware of their own self-interest and self-preservation until this period of time where historians talk about this as the world in one of the most dark, brutal places. Right? We think about the period of World War II as the winter of the world and a darkness that really did descend over our world. But we go back to this period of history and it was dark and it was brutal. And if I can tell you that the most modern reference that historians make to help you parallel what this would have been like for the Jews is if you were in Russia in the 1930s under Stalin. There were spies everywhere. You weren't allowed to meet collectively. And so everybody was just locking down and trying to protect what they had. And so in this moment in history, the decision of a ruler like Herod to slaughter innocent children, right? This is part of the Christmas story. We're getting there in the next few weeks. Here we go. But when Herod decided to kill all of the children in Bethlehem because he'd heard rumors of another king and ruler who was going to take over, what he did in those days wouldn't have seemed extreme. It would have been the act of prevention to preserve stability from the potential of another invading nation. You lost me, Jen. What are we talking about? I'm talking about what happens when we don't make time to give thanks. I'm talking about what happens when we forget that God fulfills promises. I'm talking about what happens when we forget that God's in control and that the joy of the Lord can be our strength. If we don't make time to give thanks, we grow discontent, afraid, and so locked into our own self-interest and self-preservation that we miss Jesus or reject him. That's what happened, isn't it? The nation locked down. And so when this child arrived, who's that kid from Nazareth? They missed it. And they rejected it because they had pushed this moment of thanks and feasting and remembrance away. All right. This seems a little heavy for Thanksgiving week. But I don't want you to miss it. Because I actually think it's a really big deal that we stop this week and give thanks. And I don't know what your traditions are. Maybe you take time around the table for everybody to share one thing they're thankful for. That's cool. That's awesome. I hope you do that. We've done that with our kids, just hearing people talk about it. But y'all, I hope that's not all that you do. I hope that you find ways to stop a little bit longer than that and give thanks. Make a list. Write it down. Build a jar. Eat all of the good foods that are going to help you remember that there is goodness in the world. I've told y'all this before. I have ice cream after every funeral. The goodness of the Lord that lives with us, even in the difficult moments. Taste and see. That's what the psalmist said. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And so this week, I want you to slow down. Give thanks. Remember who you are and whose you are. Y'all, this week, if I can be so bold to say this, it is time for us to feast at the end of what has been a very long fast. The last year and a half has been a really long fast. And I am not in a position to declare it over, but I am in a position of faith inviting you to a moment to feast, to step away and to remember a God who keeps his promises. There is time for it, but you have to remember that it's important and make it happen. And not just this week. I'm going to keep inviting you to worship every single week. And not just because I like to see you, even in person sometimes, but because this matters. This can be the year that you don't get to the other side of Christmas and realize that you missed Jesus. This can be the year as we prepare him room that we start by giving thanks. Because when we give thanks, we remember. And when we don't give thanks, we forget. I want you to walk into Christmas, and I want you to walk into 2022 with Jesus. He's coming. Don't miss him. God, I thank you that you are a faithful God who keeps promises. And we are a people who have so many reasons that we have been hurting and that we have been struggling. And so this Thanksgiving, God, we need it. We need time to step away, to feast, to reach out to our neighbors, and to remember that you have never let us go, not even for a minute. And so, God, I pray a blessing over our feasting this week, that we would put our eyes on you, that we would remember who you are, that we would be so intentional about giving thanks that we set ourselves up to see Jesus in our lives every single day. Jesus, we need you. We want to see you, and we want to live for you. And so help us to not be afraid, to not turn inward, but to look to you and to celebrate, because you've been so good to us. It's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Grand earth is quaked before, moved by the sound of his voice, and seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well with me. Far be it from me to not believe, even when my eyes can't see. And this mountain that's in front of me will be thrown into the midst of the sea. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. Through it all, my eyes are on you, and it is well. It is well.
That was beautiful. Thank you, guys. Isn't it well with our souls this morning? Jeez. Thanks, guys. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning. I have one or two quick things. Just a reminder, all of those Christmas boxes, we've got 200 of them. Let's fill them. Let's fill them for some kids who could really use them. There's a list, the whole thing. It's super easy. You'll see Johnny right out here at the food truck as you walk out. And then one last thing. Oh, yeah, it is also online only next week. Don't forget that. The other thing is that today is Miss Amy's last day with us. Yes, it's very sad. She and her family have been with Ashridge Church for 5 years. 5 whole years, which is incredible. Amy and Neil and Ansel and their beautiful poodle are heading to Idaho to be closer to family. And so if you want to give Amy a hug and to tell her that you love her, she'll be right out front. Make sure you stop by and say goodbye to her. We love you, Amy. We're going to miss you. And with that, we will see you all 2 weeks from today right here at Ashridge Church. It is our big kids party for Christmas, so don't miss that if you've got kids. Y'all take care.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope that you encountered the living God from wherever you're watching from today online. We want to connect with you and help you take a next step. So go to cc.ashleyridgechurch.org or click the Connect card button in the Ashley Ridge Church app and let us know what your next step is. Share a prayer request. You can check any of those boxes, but that's the easiest way for you to connect with us. Also, a couple quick things. Christmas is coming, so go to christmasforsomerville.com or in the Ashley Ridge app, and you can see all of the details for all of the Christmas experiences that are going to be going on, including the Christmas album from Ashley Ridge Worship, which is Echoes, the Christmas album. That's coming wherever you get your digital music, so make sure you tap into that today too. Thanks so much for being here today. We'll see you back online next week, online only, 10 o'clock.